Spirit 92.9 welcomes you to The Lunch Break with your friends Josh, Jess, and Rachel. Join us as we chat about life, food, faith, and everything in between.
Hello, and welcome to episode 4 of the Lunch Break podcast. I'm Rachel, and I'm joined by Josh and Jess. And wow, we have quite the topic today. We are talking about understanding each other. Okay, Boomer is the title of this episode.
That was Josh's idea.
Yes, it was.
It was.
So we are going to be talking about, we all represent different generations, and there are some great things about that, and there can also be some challenges when you're working together, when you're in faith communities together. We're going to dive into it today, but before we get into everything, what is in your lunchbox?
Oh, yeah. We should talk about that this is how this whole thing began, was conversations around the lunch table.
Yep.
And so we always bring our lunch, and we share our recipes for our lunches at spirit929.com.
That's right. Okay, Jess, you want to start
I'll
us
go
off?
first. Yeah.
Okay.
I think we all have something similar or in common with our meals today. There's chicken involved.
Do we all have chicken?
Yeah. We all have
awesome.
chicken.
Nice.
It's easy, right? I made homemade chicken fried rice.
Ooh.
And
Lovely.
I was in a chicken fried rice kind of mood last night, so I've got leftovers today.
Yay! Josh,
Yay.
you want to go
So
next?
mine, yeah, and I don't have a picture of it to show the studio audience on YouTube right now. But what
in
I made
lunchroom.
is like the simplest thing ever. I sort of forgot that we needed to bring a lunch today. And so I'm like, okay, what's something really, really easy I could do? So this morning I took chicken breasts, cream cheese, and ranch seasoning and put them all in the crock pot. And 4 hours later, the entire office
It smells so
smells good.
amazing.
Yeah. So I've tried a little bit of it. After we record, I'm gonna eat some more, and I got some of those Hawaiian sweet rolls as well that I can eat it on. So yeah, it's super super simple, but it's tasty.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. I've had that before. I've heard it called a lot of different things, but it's really easy and really good.
Love it. So
What you got, Rachel?
I also have chicken. So I'm a big snack plate person. I'm a snacky girl. So this is buffalo chicken salad that
Wow.
I made, and cut up little baby cucumbers and strawberries. So yeah, that's mine. Healthy little lunch today.
It's so
Nice.
pretty.
Thank you.
I know it's very colorful.
Thank you.
It's very
Kind of like Rachel.
It's just aesthetically pleasing.
Thank you. That is the highest compliment. Thank you. So
right.
today we're talking about understanding each other because each one of us represents different generations. I represent Gen Z, Josh is a millennial,
Yeah.
and Jess is Gen X. So we wanted to talk first about, there's a lot of different terminology that comes with our generations, and Jess, you have some very interesting ones for your generation.
Well, there's like slang that goes with every generation, and then the other generations are like, what in the world does that even mean?
What do you mean? I've never heard that before.
Like when you listen to kids these days talk, you're like, what are they talking about? They have their own language. But we all have that, right? In
Yeah.
our different generations. And so for Gen X, I said a lot of ours would not be acceptable now because they were kind of like mean or degrading. So I didn't include any of those. But we've come a long way, right? And learned a lot. How about take a chill pill?
Oh yeah, I've heard that one. Is Gen X where that originated?
Yes.
Take a chill
It
pill.
just, obviously it means it's today's you need to calm down, right?
it's so sassy.
like,
Like, take a chill pill.
relax.
Yeah, snap your fingers when you say that.
Or Rachel loves it. This one, we taught her this one. Gag me with a spoon.
Oh my! Ugh! Like, why would you say that? Why
I
would
don't
you
even
ever
know.
say that? That's
Because
disgusting.
it's much more lively than saying gross, I guess.
I mean, yes, it is very descriptive.
Yeah.
Very visual.
It's a weird thing. I don't even know how that started, but we all said it in my generation. Or everything was to the max. Like,
oh my goodness!
I'm just like freaking out to the max. Or, whatever. Everything was to the max. It was just to express above and beyond, right? Like
Okay.
overly happy, overly excited,
To the max.
yeah.
Wow.
One more. How about gnarly?
Gnarly, dude. Is that like
That was-
surfer talk or?
Yeah, I was thinking that's like
Yeah.
skateboarding.
It's
Yeah.
kind of, but we would say like rad, gnarly, righteous.
Righteous!
all of these words to describe things. So, yeah. I mean, I'm a child of the 80s and early 90s,
Yeah.
so grunge was big in the early 90s.
Oh, yeah.
So words like gnarly were a thing. Yeah.
Love it.
And now you know. And maybe they'll
There we
come
go.
back and you'll know what they mean.
Let's
Or maybe
bring
not.
back Gag Me with a Spoon.
Yeah.
Maybe not that one.
Yeah. Josh, you're a millennial.
Yes. Millennial phrases. Man, we've gone through a lot. The millennials. Because we kind of, as the internet really gained prominence and social media really started to accelerate, we were kind of there. We were kind of that generation. And so there's a lot of things. I feel like hashtags kind of started with us.
Hashtag
Yeah,
blessed.
hashtag relationship goals. Fill in the blank. We did a lot of those, but some of our phrases, we said the struggle is real a lot.
Oh, yes.
Struggle is real.
We still use that one, don't we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This one, to our shame, we popularized the word bae. Like for your significant other, your bae.
bae?
Yeah, B-A-E.
And it stands for, do you know what it stands for?
I don't even know.
Before anyone else.
Oh, good
Oh,
grief.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Keeps getting worse. I'm sorry, everyone, on behalf of millennials everywhere. We also popularized I can't even.
I can't even.
I literally can't even. The phrase break the internet. I think that started with us.
Yeah.
It's going to break the internet. And then here was just one more that a lot of people my age have done before. We would say a phrase and then end it with said no one ever. Like, I love working on Saturdays. Said no one ever. Definitely used that in a Facebook post before.
I feel like YOLO was big with the millennial generation
Yeah.
too, because that was a big one, right? It was everywhere. Hashtag YOLO.
Yeah, for-
you only live once.
For a hot
Yeah.
minute, that
Yeah.
definitely
Yeah.
had its day.
Yeah.
Ooh, listen to him using current slang for a hot minute.
Wow.
Is that current?
That is
I don't
current,
know.
Josh. That is
I think
very
it's
Gen
Wow.
Z of you.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so speaking of Gen Z, that's me.
Yeah.
So the weird thing, though, is that I have a little bit of millennial influence. I'm called,
Sure.
I hate this term, but I'm called a cusper. So I'm on like the end of millennial and the beginning of Gen Z.
So you could identify with
Yes.
either generation.
Yes.
But you've kind of embraced Gen Z.
Yeah.
I would, yeah.
I'd say you're very Gen Z. Yeah.
Is that a good or a bad thing? We'll find out.
Isn't that what we're talking about today?
Yeah. So a lot of these I say all of the time. So slay is a big thing.
I do hear you say that often.
Make sure you're describing what these mean
Yes.
for older people like me and beyond that don't know.
Yeah. So slay is when someone does something really great,
They
or
slayed it.
if they look great, or the outfit is just popping off. Oh, that's another term. You know, if you have a great outfit on, it's like, ooh, you're slaying today, something like
Okay.
that. There's also tea, which I have used tea on this podcast before. Tea is you have like, there's some gossip. There's something deeper that we're talking about, you know, something
Like
like
You got
juicy
tea.
tidbits
Yes.
of information.
yes, like,
tea.
ooh, we're sipping the tea, which means we are sharing what's going on with
Okay.
each other.
Can I
Okay.
just say my Gen Z daughter texted me the other day, I've got tea. And I was like, oh, I didn't know you like tea. Thought you drink coffee.
No, she's got tea, Jess.
She had
got
tea. And that's when I learned what that meant.
There's also It's Giving, which Josh, you brought up this one because it's true. It's Giving is how do I describe this? It's Giving is so if I see something pink, so pink is my favorite color. Okay, so I see the color pink and I'm like, it's giving me.
Vibes? Like you vibes?
Yeah, something very much that type of thing. You're describing what that specific thing is giving. So if we were talking about our lunch break, it'd be like, it's giving the lunch break podcast, you know? Like,
Okay.
So there's
right.
there's also sus, which
Oh, I know that one.
good yay, Jess.
Only because of my kids. Yeah.
So sus is suspicious. It's just shorter.
Seems
Okay.
kind of sus.
Yeah.
Right?
Like, that's kind of sus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there you go. There's your Gen Z lesson for the day.
Wow. We had a crash course in all these different idiosyncrasies of our generational languages.
Yeah.
Let's see how many times we can each use these in today's podcast for describing our own
Someone tally
generation.
it.
Make it a contest.
Yeah. So we all represent these different generations. Again, Jess is Gen X, Josh is Millennial, and I'm Gen Z. And we all work together.
Yep.
And sometimes that can be a great thing. And sometimes it can be a little bit of a challenge. And we've been all navigating that together. So that's why we wanted to talk about it today. And we each wanted to give you our different perspectives from someone representing that generation, the things that, the stereotypes with our generation and the things that we have questions about.
Yeah.
So, Jess, representing Gen X, you have the floor.
Well, and this is what's interesting about this is, so I've been here at Spirit 92.9 for like 16 years, and I was the youngest at one point, and now I'm, one of the older ones, and Josh came in about, how long have you been here? 9 years? 10
11.
11?
11.
What?
So close.
Oh, time flies when you're having fun. So when Josh came in, and he was fresh out of college, so then it was like, oh, this is going to be interesting. And then I was doing a morning show with a guy who wasn't that far out of college and trying to figure out, like, how are we going to relate to each other and everything like that. Well, now he's kind of grown up, right? And so now it's the next generation coming in, you guys, the Gen Zers, and kind of the same thing, like, okay, now how are we all going to relate to each other? Because I could be your mother, And so, but it's so interesting. So for Gen X, I think the things that really define our generation are things like having a strong work ethic, really struggling, though, with work-life balance, because we were taught to work hard and to give 100% to your work. And that might mean that sometimes overworking would be kind of a badge of honor.
Yeah.
Like you were so dedicated and amazing if you worked too much, And so that's been something we've had to kind of relearn a little bit. We were taught to respect our elders. We wore our Sunday best to church. We dressed up for job interviews. Everything was about being very respectful and professional, I feel like, with my generation. I took typing class on a typewriter, and so technology has changed so much. Technology has changed so much from, when I was in high school, college age to now. And so we're kind of the generation that's trying to invent it and keep up with it, right? Depends who you are and what side you're on. And I think, too, like, for us, we can be viewed now as maybe a little out of touch by younger generations and maybe too conservative sometimes. So those were all things that were totally normal when I was in my young 20s, but have changed a lot now. So it's really just an interesting place to be. Yeah.
Well, Josh,
Yeah.
representing the millennials.
Millennials. See, millennials, it was such a buzzword for such a long time,
Yeah.
millennials, because for a while we were the youngest generation in the workforce. And so, for lack of a better term, we were kind of the whipping boy generation for a while because people would be like, "Oh, those millennials,
Yeah.
they don't have a work ethic, and all they got were participation trophies growing up." And I'm like, "Well, who gave us those participation trophies?"
And I feel that as Gen Z.
Burn.
Yep.
But now most of us millennials are in our 30s or even into our 40s. And we're growing up. We've been in the workforce, some of us for a decade or more. Many of us are married and have kids. And so it's just like we've kind of transitioned from being that youngest working generation to, hey, we're in this now. And I think
We're grown-ups now.
Yeah, we're grown-ups. And I think we've maybe gained a little more respect as we've sort of gone into leadership roles and different things like that. But it is interesting now seeing the transition, and now you see Gen Z kind of taking the spot where we were a few years ago. And I start to see the generational divide. Like, I don't always understand the younger people anymore. And I was one of those younger people not that long ago. And so it happens with every generation, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But it's just sort of interesting to see that happen in your own life.
But you can probably, relate to Rachel's generation a little bit because
Yeah.
you were there. So maybe it helps you have a little more grace and empathy for them, or
well,
no?
I think I do sometimes find myself getting annoyed with younger people. But isn't that part? That's kind of what we're talking about
Tension
today,
is
right?
rising.
Sometimes there's generational differences, and you're like, why is that cool? It's also it's a little bit hard when I feel like my generation used to be the cool generation, and now we're, at least according to the younger people, not cool anymore.
Josh,
like,
are you saying I'm cool?
well, you are cool. But sometimes you see you. I don't feel like I'm old, but then you've got some younger Gen Zers that are like, oh man, they're old. They dress like old people. I'm like, I'm not old. I'm just in my 30s.
But think about it, Josh. When you were in your young 20s, you thought like 30s was old, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
now that you're in your
Yeah.
30s, you're like, I'm not old at all. But Jess is old. She's in her 40s, and I'm thinking,
It's
I'm
funny.
not that old.
It's funny how, with each
Yeah.
generation that goes by, you think those same things.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Rachel, what's it like to be on the? I don't want to say the bottom of the totem pole, but
What's it like to be a young whippersnapper?
what's it like to be a young whippersnapper?
You're
in this day and
whippersnappers
age?
these days.
Oh, goodness. Well, I mean, as Josh mentioned, when millennials were, the youngest generation, we were the ones that were always under the microscope. We were the ones that were being studied and like, why do they behave like this? And why do they do this? And that is very much where I'm at. Like, we've gone to radio conferences in the past and they're like, this is the trends with Gen Z. And I'm sitting in the audience like, oh, yes, please tell me about myself. So it's definitely a weird thing that we are kind of just at the center of a lot of conversations because we're the youngest ones. And even now, younger than us is Gen Alpha, which your daughter is Gen Alpha,
My younger
Jess.
daughter, yeah.
And that's weird for me. I'm considered the youngest right now, even though there is a younger generation, and I don't understand what they're talking about or what they're doing. So it's a very, like, the same thing we're, like, understanding the people the younger than us it's a weird thing. So for Gen Z, I feel like there's a lot of stereotypes about Gen Z. The word woke gets thrown around a lot. The same thing with millennials. Like, we're lazy. We don't want to work. We have short attention spans and, all of this thing. And I think the big thing that I recognize in my generation is we have that work-life balance and we chase after it and we crave it. And it's a very important thing. Like, one of the things for me when I was looking for this job, I said, I want work-life balance. And if I don't have that, then it's not going to be something I'm interested in. Because I think one of the things that I'm unlearning, and that is another thing, my parents are Gen X. So I feel like I'm unlearning some of the things that they dealt with when they were growing older. And one of those things is your work defines who you are. And so I have had to unlearn my work isn't who I am. It's a part of what I do. And we work in ministry, so that is a huge part of who we are and what we do. But that isn't my identity. My identity is in Christ. And that is where my identity is found. And I think another thing with my generation, we want to find our identity somewhere. And so for a lot of my generation, unfortunately, they're finding their identity in the wrong places. And they're chasing for that community, that meaning, that where do I belong feeling. And because we're doing that, there's just a lot of things that we put our identity in that aren't what our identity should be in. And I think the reason why there's a tension, right, between Gen X or boomers or millennials is we are standing firm and saying, no, I want separation. I want separation from work and life. And I want to be able to enjoy this life while I'm here, is a big thing for us.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, that's really enlightening just to even listen to, because I just think as you're talking about the work-life balance part of it, I think back to when I was younger and working. Back then, it was like the sacrifice that was made in order to get that badge of honor for overworking was your family. And, people would work more than they would be with their families. And then there's probably some generational trauma because of that, because kids grew up without mom and dad or even one or the other hardly ever at home. And now family is really important again. That's kind of really swung around to where that's a priority and people are making that a priority again. And I think that your generation is helping the other generations, the rest of us, to kind of see that again and open our eyes to, hey, work is important, but don't let it be at the expense of life and your family.
Right,
you know?
right. And I definitely think it's a lot of that changed during the pandemic.
Yeah.
Like I remember when I was in college, everything was about striving and everything was, I got to get the A, I have to do this, I have to work hard, do the internship, fill in the blank, whatever. And the pandemic happened and we realized how important our communities are and how important people are to help us and for us in our faith communities to keep us encouraged and to keep us keeping the faith.
Yeah.
And I think that was definitely a change. And so when you get back into, the pandemic had ended and we started going back into work, we crave that community more than ever. And I think that's across every single generation, not just us. And we have to do the work together and understand each other so that we can have strong communities that encourage us in our walks with Christ.
Yeah. That's a good point. Like the whole pandemic thing changed a lot for every generation.
Yeah.
And I think in a good way. I mean, obviously we wouldn't want that to happen again.
No.
But we just think about how it helped us kind of get our priorities a little straighter and remember what's important. And so across all generations, I would say, right?
Yeah. I think it's also so interesting how so often, and touching just on what you were saying earlier about Gen Z kind of teaching us to get back to that work-life balance. I think so often the next generation sort of sees what maybe some of the shortcomings were in the previous generation, and then they sort of swing the pendulum the other way. And that can be really helpful because each generation, and I'm speaking very broadly here, but each generation has blind spots, right? And so even though sometimes we kind of look at a younger generation and be like, what are you doing? Why do you live like so often it's reactive to how the other generation has been and some of the things that we've been blind to. And so that's where I think we can really learn from each other.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because we can look at what we don't like about the other generations, what we don't understand, especially for the older generation, looking oftentimes down on the youngest generation, the Gen Zers. And, like you brought up the whole like woke or just lack of morals maybe people would think, but that's not always the case, right? It's like you said, people are floundering, kind of looking for what to put their hope in and their purpose. They're just looking in the wrong places. And if we look at it like that, maybe we can have more empathy and understanding for your generation.
Yeah. And I think that is, speaking as someone that represents Gen Z, the reason why we might have an opinion on Gen X or millennials or boomers is because we are so often on the chopping block. And we are so often like, well, they don't do this and they are lazy. And so much of the talk around our generation can become so negative. And I'm not saying that as Gen Z, we don't talk negatively about other generations because we have and we do. And the issue that I think the reason why there is such that tension is my generation is in crisis. We have gone through so many things in the time that we were growing up, so many tragedies that we have experienced growing up. I mean, all of us have. But I'm just thinking about, we went through the pandemic and then 9/11 was also a part of my generation. We were younger, but the effects after 9/11, we lived through all of that. Different things that happened in our country.
Violence, I'm thinking it's got to be big.
Yes, so many of those things we have experienced and watched on TV and watched the news. And we are at this point in our generation where we're just trying to handle all of it. And we're not handling it well because how can we? It's so overwhelming. And so we're trying to find out who we are. We're trying to find our identity. And we're trying and looking in all of these different places. And it's just too much. And so we numb ourselves with social media. We numb ourselves with other things. And it's hard. And what we need is that genuine human connection and understanding between other generations.
Yeah, and now there's so much divide that it's hard to find that.
Yeah. Well, with that being said, it is time for questions from the lunchbox.
Ready?
Dive a little deeper here. So, by the way, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see that I have a lunchbox that actually looks like a boombox. It is a boombox lunchbox. We draw questions
So cool.
out of this.
Should I do a drum roll?
Yeah, let's do a drum roll. We're going to get question number 1 here that I am drawing randomly. And it is, how can people from other generations make you feel loved and accepted despite your differences?
Ooh.
Jess, why don't we start with you on this one?
Be patient with me. This is one of the, I just feel like even more recently, just within the last few years, the technology has, I was always the one who could figure everything out. And then all of a sudden I'm not. Because, yeah, there's a lot going on, personally and stuff like that. But things are just changing so fast all the time. And so sometimes it just takes me a minute to figure it out.
Yeah.
So be patient. And also just understand that, Rachel, like what you were just talking about, we were all kind of there once where we were the youngest generation.
Yeah.
And we were doing everything wrong according to the older generations. And that just changes from generation to generation. And so, give us some grace, but then also be willing to let us know how we can be better,
Mm-hmm.
And then it's on us to take that, with the right heart attitude and do what we can. But I think we just all have to give each other a lot of patience and understanding.
And grace.
And grace. So
Lots
much grace.
and lots of grace.
Yep.
Josh, can you read the question one more time?
Great. I absolutely can. How can people from other generations make you feel loved and accepted despite your differences?
I think the answer is in the question itself, acceptance. That is a big thing because I think so much of the tension that can happen with our generations is since we don't understand each other, we want to form someone into what we are. So I would want to form Josh into a Gen Zer and be like, believe what I believe and force. And or like the same thing with me and Jess. She would, it's like you're trying to fit a person, make them clay and form them into what you want them to be. And I think the thing that I would wish and I pray for is that between our generations, representing my generation, that there is an understanding, that there is not this butting heads and fighting and this pointing fingers, but rather a listening ear and an open table where everyone is invited and everyone's opinions are heard and there's genuine, honest conversation with each other rather than, well, you, this, and the pointing fingers game. I think a lot of it boils down to we just want to have a seat at the table and we want to be understood rather than ridiculed.
Yeah, and I would just add to that in answer to this question that we need to actually spend time with each other.
Yes.
Because it's really easy to form a stereotype of someone when you're at a distance, but when you're actually with that person and you're in that person's life, you start to see, okay, yeah, there are differences, but really there are a lot more similarities between us than there are differences,
Right.
and that becomes very evident when you're actually spending time with someone.
Yeah.
Okay, question number 2.
Stuff.
Drawing question number 2. Oops, I accidentally got
Oh, no.
2. Have to pick one. Here we go. What do you want people from other generations to accept and adopt that you/your generation believes is important? That's a big one.
That is a really
That's a deep question.
I'm going to read it one more time so we can think about it a little
Yes,
more.
thank
What
you.
do you want people from other generations to accept and adopt that you/your generation believes is important?
Who wants to start? Everyone's being quiet.
Josh, you answer first while we think about it.
From my generation, well, I guess I just want people to know that we're again, the stereotypes of millennials for a long time was that we are lazy and entitled. And I think you can see now that we're not. I mean, I know that vein can run in every generation to some extent, but I guess I'd like other generations to know we're not.
Do you want me to go?
Things that were I got it.
Okay.
Things that were important to us that I wish. Okay, this is not going to be probably a popular opinion with the younger generation, but something I wish that the younger generation would adopt that we did was thinking and acting respectfully. And Rachel, you're great at this. I'm not talking, but there's a lot of the younger generation that because we're so careful about how we're raising kids or talking to kids now, a lot of the respect and just the respect and even professionalism when it comes to time isn't the way it used to be. And I realize there's going to be a little change and that society has changed, but it's really hard to just see sometimes some younger generations just lose that respect for their elders and that kind of stuff. That I think that just makes me really sad. And it's not like judgmental against them sad. It's just how we've kind of moved as a society, as a culture. I'd love to see that come back again. I don't know how that's going to happen. I mean, it falls a lot on parents and stuff like that, but it's just kind of sad to see how some people are so disrespected,
Yeah.
or not seen as valuable or worthy, or there's so much selfishness that's kind of not a thing anymore.
Yeah. And I totally agree with you, especially with the selfishness thing. And I can say as someone who represents Gen Z, that is a really hard thing in my generation that I do not accept, because I would much rather we be understanding of each other than always me, I focused.
And it's a biblical principle,
yes,
right? Others
absolutely.
before yourself. Well, we have the opportunity and privilege of knowing that as believers and having been raised up, all of us in the church, knowing that it's kind of Jesus, others, yourself. And when you live in that way, that life is better. But how do you pass that on to the next generation that's not in the church or believers? I don't know.
Yeah. So for me, I think the thing that my generation craves more than ever, like I know we talked about community earlier, but genuine community. People that are being real and honest with you. Because one thing about my generation, we can see through fake like that. Because we've been around social media, and so much social media is fake and it's not real. And so the thing that we want are real people, real conversations, real talk. That is the thing that we crave more than anything, because we don't want fake anymore. We've had so much fake for so long. We're so ready for some reality and some real. And so I think vulnerability, that is a big thing. Embracing vulnerability and accepting vulnerability when there's time for that.
Yeah.
So authenticity,
Yes.
you're saying, is a
yes.
big deal.
Yes,
I
absolutely.
think we can all agree on that.
Yeah.
I definitely see how culture kind of shifted to thinking that the younger generation just wanted everything to be, even in the church, like, a show, a concert and whatever. And now I see your generation, and I love it that you guys are just craving truth and
Yes.
authenticity, both in
Yes.
your faith and in your relationships.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And
Awesome.
and finding truth in the right place. That's the thing that I pray and I hope for my generation, that we would find truth where we can find the ultimate truth, which is in Jesus.
Yeah.
So yeah, authenticity.
Awesome.
Well, do we have time for one more quick question?
Okay, one more quick one.
One more.
We'll go quick
We're
because
getting
we're
hungry
running
here.
We're running out of time. What makes working with someone from a different generation a challenge, and what makes it great?
I would love to hear this from the two of you.
Two-tiered question. Okay, I'll start with this one. So, what makes it a challenge? Well, like anything, sometimes you don't always understand everything about a younger generation. I think for me, I was the youngest here at the station for a long time, and now I'm not the youngest anymore, which isn't a terrible thing, but it's still, I think I kind of liked being the youngest.
I'm not the baby anymore.
So maybe there's a little bit of a challenge there, but also what makes it great? Well, I think specifically in our case, we have Rachel and Jasmine, who are both Gen Z, and I think they've just brought so much energy and life into the building, and it's just fun. Like you've made work more fun. So I think that's something that, I guess, talking specifically about Gen Z here, but that you two have brought into the building. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, I would agree with Josh. I mean, the challenges are the things that we've been talking about this whole time. Just maybe not understanding each other. We come from different generations and beliefs and cultures even. And so just trying to connect can be hard sometimes. But on the flip side of that, it's like we need that. We need to have the voice of the next generation here, because if all of us, quote unquote, older people, just did things our way and kept doing our things our way, eventually no new people are coming into the Kingdom family. No new people are coming to listen to the radio station, and so having that voice of the next generation is so vital. And I would say in any workplace, if you have the opportunity, make sure that you have all generations represented, because you're trying, especially in ministry, to reach all generations. But if you're not giving them a voice, you're just assuming you think you know what they want, right? And this has been a challenge for me. I'm not going to lie. It's been a challenge for me to slow down, open up my mind and heart and ears, and just listen and think about things from a different perspective than my own. So,
yeah. So for me, one of the things that can make it a challenge is there is this gap in understanding of trying to explain ways that I process things, or ways that, the way that I work. And so that can be a little bit of a challenge sometimes. And it can also be a challenge because I've been in environments before where, because I'm the youngest one in the room, don't really have a seat at the table. And that can be very hard. And like what you were just saying, Jess, it's exactly that, of having every generation represented and having a seat at the table and having a voice. That gives you like a full, what's the word that I'm looking for? An entire worldview of, you're representing one worldview, you're representing another, and I'm representing a different one. And it gives you a broader perspective. And I've been in environments before where I was just told to sit and listen and not really contribute. And that has been very hard. And I'm very blessed here at Spirit 92.9, where I have a seat at the table. And I don't want to get emotional, but I have a seat at the table. And I have a voice. And that means so much to my generation, that we're being heard and we're being understood and we're being valued for the work ethic that we bring to the table and the experience that we have. So that's the thing that makes it great, is when you have a seat at the table for everyone, and everyone has a voice, and your things that you bring to the table matter.
I love that. Well, on that happy note, it is time for us to wrap things up today. So we hope that this has been an enlightening conversation for you, whatever generation you're in. We hope that you've learned something about the other generations represented here, and also about yourself and how you can be more welcoming and loving to, everybody from older than you and younger than you, so that we can all work together to make things better. So thank you for listening today. This podcast, of course, available on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and Amazon Music. Please rate it 5 stars if you get the chance. It just helps more people find it. You can also watch it. I like to watch podcasts because I like to see the people who are talking, and you can watch us on the Spirit 92.9 YouTube channel. And, let us know there too in the comments if you have any feedback or thoughts about this conversation. We would sure love to hear it. Thanks so much, and we'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.